on a Thursday evening here in Las Vegas, Nevada, alongside Joe Serralo. I am Tim Murray, and boy, a lot going on. Movement galore in the number 2 overall pick market. Will it be Jaden Daniels? Will it be Drake May? A lot of movement today. We'll dive deep into that later on in the show. We've got injuries to discuss left and right all over the NBA, and it is the final day of the NHL season to all who celebrate. So we are going to have the Stanley Cup playoffs getting going here shortly. But first and foremost, where are my manners? Joe, hello, sir. Welcome.
Tim, great to be here, man. I'm excited.
Man, that flow is solid. That is a solid flow. That might be number 1 flow at VSiN, even though Patrick Maher might get upset.
Well, that was the prereq, actually. I've been talking to John here for a few months, and he said that flow has to be perfect before we put you on air. So I think that was why ultimately I got the call today.
Yeah, so we went to the bullpen. Joe will be here for the next 2 nights. I will be doing mornings tomorrow. JVT has been on morning duty all week long, filling in for Paulie Howard. I'll jump in tomorrow morning. Looking forward to that. So Joe will hold it down with us for the next couple of days. So let's jump right into it. We don't have any NBA tonight. The play-in tournament resumes tomorrow. And boy, it has been unfortunate, to say the least, if you are just a basketball fan, when you look at the star power that has been banged up. We started it off with Giannis at the end of the regular season with the calf injury. We know he will not play Game 1. We've got questions about Kawhi Leonard. Will he be available in Game 1? Certainly some uncertainty there. But in the more immediacy, we know Zion Williamson is out for the foreseeable future, especially tomorrow night, and that's why Sacramento is either a pick'em or a 1-point favorite on the road against New Orleans. And then late last night, the Chicago Bulls, the Miami Heat are taking on the Philadelphia 76ers, Joe, and Jimmy Butler goes down in a heap, and he is going to be sidelined with a sprained MCL. So what does that do moving forward, in your opinion, as you look at Miami, as they are now a 1.5-point favorite against the Chicago Bulls, who, give credit to the Bulls, man. I mean, they played a pretty mediocre team in Atlanta, but Kobe White was phenomenal last night. Just an incredible performance from him. 42 points, 9 boards, 6 assists, no turnovers. Now the Bulls are catching 1.5 on the road at Miami, and, the playoff superhero, Jimmy Butler, is going to be out.
And I think it makes the Bulls the play in this one, I mean, Miami's still favorites in this game, but you look at Chicago, the way they played last night. Of course, it's the NBA, so no team is going to dominate for all 48 minutes, right? You're going to go up big early, let the other team back in. It's what happens. It's why most games you can tune in at the fourth quarter and catch all the action. But Chicago, just so much deeper now than Miami. Obviously, the DeMar DeRozan Jimmy Butler matchup was one that I think a lot of basketball fans couldn't wait for. And now you mentioned Kobe White having a great game. He's going to eat in this matchup. I mean, he had a great year, over 19 points per game, averaged nearly 21 against the Heat, got better every game against Miami. I just think that Jimmy being out means that Kobe White now, him and DeMar, the floor is just going to open up for those guys drastically, and my money's on Chicago in this one.
Yeah, haven't made a bet yet, but that would be the way. Certainly, I would be leaning with Chicago headed on the road to Miami. Funny to think that, here we are just a year removed from this being that final play-in game as well. And Miami, everybody kind of counted them out. They get that victory, and then they make the magical run all the way to the finals just a year ago. We just showed you, for those watching with us on YouTube. We're always free on YouTube, by the way, youtube.com/VSiN Live, and hour number 1. Hello to all of you in Chicago on Marquee Network. But I think looking ahead here, the Boston Celtics have caught yet another break in the Eastern Conference. And if Joe Mazzulla's team does not make it to the to the NBA Finals this year, I mean, what a complete disaster it would be. This team has been the most consistent team. They've been the best team in the Eastern Conference, and you're looking at the odds right now, Joe, sitting at minus 200 on the Boston Celtics. Think about how this bracket has broken for them, where you're sitting in the first round, you're either going to get a under 500 Chicago Bulls team or a Heat team that, yes, beat you last year in the Eastern Conference Finals, but more than likely will be without Jimmy Butler. Second round, it's an Orlando team that, hey, congrats to Orlando on a heck of a season, overachieving. can't score, good defensive team, does not scare the Celtics whatsoever. Cavaliers kind of limped their way in and cowardly played the final game of the season. And then whoever emerges out of the other side of the bracket, whether it is the Bucks who get fully healthy with Giannis, but we know they have injuries. So the Celtics right now, man, there were so many points during this season where, I was thinking, Joe, all right, when am I going to come in against the Celtics, take the field against them? I just can't do it. I can't do it in the Eastern Conference. And this is yet another, in my opinion, break for them where they either get Chicago, who scares nobody, or you get a banged-up Miami team.
Yeah, 1,000%. You look at what the Celtics did against the Bulls this year, and 3-0, all of those wins by double digits. They're easily the biggest winner in this because Miami, had Jimmy Butler been healthy, had Miami beat Chicago tomorrow night, even if they don't beat Boston, very unlikely that they would have emerged out of that series. They're going to tire the Celtics out. It's become a pretty good rivalry. Erik Spoelstra just knows how to coach against guys like Tatum and Jaylen Brown, especially in the playoffs. And so if you had a Miami-Boston first-round matchup, that's your best chance right there to play the field. Right now, if the Boston Celtics get Chicago, I'll tell you right now, they're not going to get tired out in the first round. And then to your point, Orlando-Cleveland, that's the best second-round matchup they could ask for. I mean, maybe the Knicks or the Bucks or Philadelphia pull something out against them in the Eastern Conference Finals, but they're going to go through the gauntlet on their side of the bracket, and Boston should be relatively well-rested by the time they get to the conference finals. I, like you, have been avoiding laying the juice on Boston to win the East all year. Now might be the time, just given that the path changed drastically.
Yeah, and Philadelphia last night, we'll see how Joel Embiid plays moving forward, but I don't know how the performance that we saw from Embiid last night can strike much fear into the New York Knicks. And I think if you're a Knicks fan out there, I don't know, Joe, are you a Knicks fan?
I'm a Knicks fan. I'm excited for this matchup.
I was going to say, look, I give credit to the Knicks for not being cowards on the final game of the season, playing for the 2 seed. They get it. They needed overtime to do so, got there. And now you look at the Sixers last night, and now you've got more time for Joel Embiid to rest. At the end of the day, Joel Embiid was going to be the MVP of the league if he didn't get hurt, but he's not 100% healthy, and you saw that last night. Now, certainly I think the concern would come is what if Joel Embiid fully gets healthy? Could that become an issue there for the Knicks? But I think a Knicks fan, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I would imagine watching last night, you have to say, all right, I feel a little bit better than what the prospect was of either a fully healthy Joel Embiid or, Jimmy, a.k.a. Michael Jordan Butler in the postseason.
Yeah, look, Jimmy in the postseason is different. I felt good about the Knicks, the way that they played Miami this regular season. I felt good about that matchup. Should it have been the Heat? But you look at Embiid last night, he really didn't impress me for much of the first 3 quarters. Turned it on late, and I'll give him his credit where it's due. Look, like you said, he would have probably been the MVP had he stayed healthy. He is undoubtedly one of the best ball players in the league. So is Jalen Brunson.
Yeah.
And then you look at the supporting casts, and even though, as individuals, maybe you look at a guy like Tyrese Maxey and you say, well, he's an all-star. You look at a guy like Tobias Harris, who, by the way, against the Knicks this year, what did he have in 4 games? 6 points per game. Tobias Harris did nothing against the Knicks this year. And when you look at the supporting casts, I love the way this Knicks unit has really gelled together, the way that they're playing Josh Hart, Dante DiVincenzo. I mean, the chemistry. You want to talk about the city of Philadelphia?
Oh, yeah, they played together for 74 years at Villanova together. They won a national championship.
Wells Fargo, that building is going to have, I think, a really healthy amount of guys pulling for the Knicks because the only team raising banners in there is the Villanova Wildcats, and the Knicks have 3 of those guys. So I really love the way this is shaping up for the Knicks, both at home and on the road. I think it's going to be a pretty energized Knicks fan base that has no problem traveling 2 hours south.
Got to watch out for Nicholas Batum. It was the Batum game yesterday as he hit 6 threes. Jared, who was on the show, he didn't get his same game parlay, but he should have gone the other way because he said Batum 1 3, he hit 6, but he needed Jimmy Butler to go over 23.5 points. So that wasn't the only injury of note that we'll be talking about tomorrow. So Jimmy Butler, of course, the big news today with the MCL injury, likely going to be sidelined a couple of weeks, Joe. But in the nightcap tomorrow, we've got the New Orleans Pelicans hosting the Sacramento Kings, and Zion Williamson may have been having the best game of his career in that game against the Lakers. He goes out with the hamstring injury. He's going to be out for the game, reevaluated in 2 weeks. So basically, he's done for the postseason.
Yeah.
He had 40 and 11, his first career 40 and 10 game. Now he's out, and I'm fascinated by this game because I think everybody and their mother is going to jump on the Sacramento Kings because what did we see last? We saw a terrific performance from the Kings, exercising demons between their arch rival, the Golden State Warriors. But the hesitation I have is Brandon Ingram certainly had some rust. It was his first game since March 21st. He's going to get some time off. We had Willie Green's quote earlier today. He said he came in early yesterday to get some work. He's knocking off some rust. He's been out for 4 weeks or so. Looked great today. We look forward to getting him back on the floor tomorrow and getting after it. And then C.J. McCollum, who shot 42% from three. He was dreadful against the Lakers, shooting 1 for 9. So haven't gotten the window yet, but I am intrigued by the Pelicans because it does feel like it is a sell-high opportunity on a Kings team who will be without my ginger brother Kevin Huerter and Malik Monk tomorrow night.
Yeah, I mean, both teams are down some guys. It's tricky because with New Orleans, you can look at the last game in one of two ways. You can look at Ingram and say, well, he's not fully healthy. He was rusty. Obviously, Willie Green's going to go out there and say that Ingram looked much better. He's not going to say, Ingram looked a little shaky at practice today. McCollum, 1 of 9. He did not, capitalize on some opportunities from deep at all. So you can look at it and say, no Zion. Those two guys didn't play well. I'm worried. Or you can look at it and say, well, they just took the Lakers to, a full 48 minutes right to the finish line. And they had a lot of things going against them. If they just play a little bit better at home, they should be able to take over and take on Sacramento. I'm not fully decided yet where I stand on this. I will say the encouraging thing, if you're leaning Pelicans, they've won 6 of their last 8 without Zion, including a 133-100 win at Sacramento to close out the year. So if you're leaning Pelicans, there's a little bit of hope for you.
Right now, 1.5 for 1 is the number across the board. Sacramento, the road favorite tomorrow night. Joe Serralo hanging out with me here on VSiN Primetime. Up next, a week from today, baby, the NFL Draft.
This is VSiN Primetime with Tim Murray and Jonathan Von Tobel on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
For a limited time, we're offering 2 weeks of our exclusive betting splits for free. Just sign up at vsin.com/splits. The VSiN betting splits page is updated with DraftKings odds every 5 minutes, so you can see changes in all the action. Find out where the public is betting based on the number of tickets and where the money doesn't match the public opinion. You can check out not just today's action, but future events as well. Take advantage of this limited time offer. Once again, head on over to vsin.com/splits and start making smarter bets today. Alongside Joe Serralo, I am Tim Murray. It is VSiN Primetime. We're live here in Las Vegas. A week from today, the NFL Draft, and one of the more fun things to bet, in my opinion. It could get a little frustrating, no doubt about it. And I know a gentleman who loves to break down the draft joins us right now on our progressive guest line. It is John Daigle. You can follow him on Twitter at NotJDaigle, and you can check him out, all his work over at Establish the Run. John, let's just start with the number 2 overall pick market. I'm going to do a deep dive on this later today, but we've seen significant movement today towards Drake May. Jaden Daniels still remains the favorite, but it has moved quite a bit. It was as high as minus 350, and it's now down around minus 160 or so for Jaden Daniels to go number 2. What's your feel on the number 2 overall pick market as we're a week out?
And I will definitely stay tuned to your breakdown because, like everyone else, I'm so interested in this pick since it creates a chain reaction with every pick afterwards. Right now, though, my entire point since February, honestly, has been that no one knows what this pick is. And so to me, it's been a numbers play the entire way. Even in this last week, I really don't know if we'll ever get the correct information until it's finally official. Very similar to the Will Levis, Anthony Richardson, CJ Stroud conundrum from last year. And so as it stands currently, whenever the collegiate season ended, Drake May was number 2. I'm not sure we've learned, honestly, anything in that time. So I've just been high pointing it. And I swear to y'all, whenever I first released the mock overnight, the odds were still plus 270. I've been doing my best to high point May at number 2, but like selling crypto or houses, like it's just been hard to actually identify the market. So I admittedly have some numbers that are still good based on the current market, but I just don't know if we're ever going to see that plus 350 you mentioned again. So maybe the number's washed, but I still believe currently that May is number 2 overall over Daniels until I've heard otherwise.
Boy, I think that'd be a mistake out of Washington to take May over Daniels. Daniels, one of my favorite quarterbacks in the country. John, thanks for coming on, man. I want to look at that J.J. McCarthy trade you've got going at number 5. What are you hearing? What do you think about Minnesota trading up to grab McCarthy? Do you think the Giants all of a sudden might try to work a trade up, maybe with Arizona, to beat them to it? Obviously, a lot of mocks out there love McCarthy going to the Giants. Where do you see that trade coming from?
And I believe right now a lot of people have the Cardinals as the team with GM Monty Alzenfort, who clearly showed he's willing to wheel and deal like he did last season with the Texans all over the board. I believe that's the team that a lot of mock drafts have the Vikings trading up with to get McCarthy at number 4 overall. I just don't view personally Marvin Harrison Jr. as the same type of player that you would want to move off of, like the Cardinals were willing to do initially with Paris Johnson Jr., who, as we all know, they eventually moved back up the board for. Like, maybe the Cardinals do have some grand master plan to trade back, ignore Marvin Harrison Jr., and instead move back up from number 11 overall after that trade to the Vikings and get one of Malik Neighbors or Rome Odunes. But it's just a lot of moving pieces to foresee that happening. Also, remember, 4 quarterbacks in a row have never been taken to start any NFL draft. So really, I'm just betting on the probable thing that's sure to happen. Instead, I have the Vikings moving up, using those 2 number 1 draft picks to move up with the Chargers at number 5 overall, because the Giants, it is well known, the Giants have done a lot of research on the big 4 quarterbacks. I have no idea how their board shakes out. That would certainly help me out, figure out my mock draft more accurately if I knew. But right now I know the Giants are doing extensive work. I just think they settle on one of the 2 receivers and Neighbors or O'Doon.
We're talking once again to John Daigle, helping us break down the NFL draft. Top 5 he was last year amongst mock drafts out there in most accurate 4th, courtesy of the Huddle Report. And we're taking a look at his most recent mock that came out today on EstablishTheRun.com. I want to jump to a potential bet that could be made here, because there's a lot of belief out there that Dallas Turner is going to be slotted in just neatly there at number 8, be the first defensive player selected. You have him dropping all the way to number 27, and I've seen recently some pushback in the betting market on Dallas Turner. His over-under sits at 9.5, juiced -120 to the over, John. What do you expect to see from Dallas Turner, and do you think at 9.5 it is worth a look at the over based off of your mock draft?
It's a situation that reminds me very much of Nolan Smith last year, and that everyone was in consensus that he was an elite edge rusher, a top 10 player, but we didn't know how necessarily fit him. And I'm not tooting my own horn. I'm just saying last year I even had Nolan Smith falling to number 30 overall to the Eagles, because it's hard to fit these players if the rest of the board, if Dallas Turner were not to fall to number 8, if the rest of the board didn't have those needs, and everyone is instead clamoring over the top cornerbacks, offensive linemen. And I think that's what's going to happen with Dallas Turner, because quite honestly, I'm not sure he's even the top edge on Atlanta's board, let alone the number 1 player at number 8 overall. After Latu got cleared from his medicals, as we know, back in UCLA, he was forced to retire with a neck injury in 2021, or at Washington, I'm sorry, came back and played for UCLA, and then obviously won the FBS award for the nation's best defensive end and defensive lineman last year. I think, having been medically cleared, Latu is the one who is the top edge on the Falcons board. Not only that, but there's been some steam, including from the great Daniel Jeremiah, NFL Network, that Byron Murphy may be the first defensive player taken as well. And that includes number 8 too. So to me, it just seems like a good bet, as you mentioned, to ignore all the consensus Dallas Turner, because he may just not fit there, honestly. And Latu or Murphy instead could not only be the number 8 overall pick, but the top defensive player taken as well.
Yeah, given the Falcons' O'Dunes there at number 8 definitely was what caught my eye the second I looked at this. I'm curious, you look at the receiver market. Giants, you've got Malik Neighbors. That's a very popular pick if people don't have the Giants taking J.J. McCarthy. How do you decide Neighbors, O'Dunes at that spot number 6? You look at the Giants depth chart, it seems like they're comprised strictly of slot receivers. Neighbors would be yet another slot wideout to join the SEC guys, Wan'Dale Robinson, Jalen Hyatt. Do you think O'Dunes could go up to 6, give the Giants a little size and outside target for Jones?
Of course, it's wide open, quite honestly, and that includes the offensive tackle market too. Yeah. It's hard to pick and choose like the fit for these teams. We think we have the positions locked in, but the names just shuffle based on who you're reading that morning. And so I do believe Neighbors, given that, as you mentioned, the Giants are a team that for whatever reason under Brian Daboll have focused on that shallower receiver who can make plays over the middle of the field in his turn-up field. Neighbors would be that player as opposed to the explosive option like Rome O'Dunes. Not only that, but also with O'Dunes, he's definitely, in my opinion, a better player than a Jalen Hyatt, but it's a similar archetype. So with Darius Slayton on the outs right now, not reporting to camp, I'm not sure if that's the kind of player they want to instead replace him with, that outside receiver. I think both Neighbors and O'Dunes are amazing players, but just given the work that Daboll's done with other guys, I believe Neighbors would be their pick. And you mentioned, we talked about it earlier with the number 8 overall pick, and that includes O'Dunes. It may not even be the Falcons, to be honest with you, understanding that they can get kind of their pick of the litter. They may just trade back because the entire league knows the Bears are taking O'Dunes at number 9. If you want him, you have to move up to number 8. And so that's why, just for my own benefit and this one practice, I'll release my final mock next week, but for my own practice, I put O'Dunes at 8, thinking that what happens to the rest of the league if he's not there at number 9?
John, I want to jump to Brock Bowers because we did a deep segment on him yesterday because a lot of different discussions. You had Tony Pauline saying he believes the floor is 10. You had Peter Schrager's mock draft having it. But then you had Adam Schefter saying 10 to 16 is a possible landing spot. We know that the Colts are fascinated with Brock Bowers. And Todd McShay alluded to what would make sense for the Jets and potentially moving down. You have Bowers going 15, which would be over his over-under, which is sitting at 11.5, 12.5. What's your feel on Brock Bowers here in the final 45 seconds?
It's a free-for-all if he doesn't go to the Jets at number 10, and maybe he will, but assuming the Chargers may trade back as well, you could see Bowers land at number 11. I still believe it's the Colts. Chris Ballard has historically drafted athletes. Brock Bowers, of course, did not test at the Combine, but we know he's recording a 36-inch vertical, 122-inch broad jump. He benches 330 pounds and deadlifts 350. Like, the guy is an absolute monster and an athlete for my money.
All right, Michael Penix, Bo Nix, 1, 2, none, quickly. In the first round?
1, but it's not Penix.
Ooh, that would not be good for me. I am heavily invested on Knicks not going in the first round. John, great stuff. Appreciate it, man. There he is, John Daigle. It is VSiN Primetime. Best bets next.
This is VSiN Primetime with Tim Murray and Jonathan Von Tobel on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
Head on over to VSiN.com where we've got our betting splits, which right now you can get for free at VSiN.com/splits. You can get those for 2 weeks by signing up there. We've got our best bets at VSiN.com/picks, and of course our written content. Adam Burke talking baseball, Zachary Cohen and JVT breaking down NBA action as we get into the postseason. So head on over to VSiN.com. Alongside Joe Serralo, I am Tim Murray. It is VSiN Primetime. Coming up in just a little bit, we will check in with a newly married man, Femi Abebefe, back from the honeymoon and back to work. So we will have him on coming up shortly. Top of the hour, I want to break down the movement that we have seen today in the number 2 overall pick market. It has been fast and furious, and I've got a lot of just different clips, including from Adam Peters himself, the general manager of the Washington Commanders, and what they are thinking at number 2. So we'll get all into that coming up top of the hour. But thanks to John Daigle for jumping on the show. Some interesting content there. Just asked him because I gave him kind of a bidding question there on the way out. if he thought Penix and or Knicks would go in the first round, and he followed up with me and he said he does think Knicks goes in the first, which I vehemently disagree with. If Laiatu Latu is not there, the edge out of UCLA, he believes that he is high on their board. So we will see. I have been very steadfast that Knicks is not going to go in the first round. I don't believe it. I don't believe a guy that is a second-round grade and looks to be a backup quarterback is going to be worthy of a first-round pick. But that's why we call it gambling. Had someone come back at me today on social media, thinks he's going to go in the top 20. I said, I'd happily book your action. But the beauty of betting, Joe, is one of us will be wrong, one of us will be right, and that's how it all plays out. So
the only guarantee that happens every time.
That's why I love this forum so much. There's no Mount Rushmore discussion. It's, hey, one will be right, one will be wrong, and we'll find out a week from today who that will be. But it is fascinating. We've seen a lot of odd shifts when it comes to Michael Penix. It looks like some steam coming in on Penix to go in the first round. His over-under still sits at 32.5, juiced to the under. But more draft talk coming up shortly. But let's get to it, as we always do here at the bottom of the hour. Let's get to our best bets.
I see you using an old style.
I'm giving you the keys to the kingdom.
Putting our money where our mouth is.
I like to live dangerously.
It's time for Best Bets.
Come on, Jerry, it's a lock.
All right. Last night, I did not have a play, but I gave out a series play, which is still the only play that I have. But the price still available, and I will run through it just quickly and get to Joe's baseball plays here tonight, even though he does have a rain out, unfortunately. But Nuggets series price. Once again, different ways to attack different series, right? You could look at a full series, or you could go with the series spread, and that's what I've done here in this Nuggets-Lakers series. -1.5 games, meaning the Nuggets have to win in 4, 5, or 6. If it takes 7, I lose the bet. It's at -140 right now at DraftKings, which is the best price out there. Other shops are hanging -155, -175 or so. Look, I think the Lakers this year are better than what they were last year, even though they made the run to the Western Conference Finals. If they were playing Oklahoma City Thunder, the Oklahoma City Thunder, Joe, maybe I'd be looking to back the Lakers to win the series, but I just think the Nuggets are a bad matchup for the Lakers, and ultimately, I just don't know if they have enough gas in the tank when you think back to what we saw on Tuesday night, how much they needed LeBron James late in that game, felt like he was running out a little bit of gas. Are these spasms going to kick in again on Anthony Davis, even though he's had an all-NBA type of season and really one of the better seasons he's had in recent memory? All that being said, I think the Nuggets take care of business. I do think the Lakers win a game, maybe 2. And I think you look back to last year, it was a sweep, but Lakers covered games 1 and 2 in Denver, and then the Nuggets, as an underdog, won game 3 and 4 in Los Angeles. I think the Lakers get a game or 2, but ultimately I think the Nuggets are just too much. And I will say, we were talking about this briefly before the show, you think back to last Friday. They had a chance to lock up the 1 seed against the San Antonio Spurs, and they couldn't do it. They lost to a bad Spurs team. Victor Wembanyama had an incredible performance, Joe. I think that gave Michael Malone a little extra, be able to kick them in the rear end a little bit more to focus them. So I think the Nuggets get this thing done. I think they're excited to play the Lakers, high-profile type of series. We know how it went after the Western Conference Finals concluded and Michael Malone taking his shot. So ultimately, I think the Nuggets dispose of the Lakers. So Nuggets -1.5 in the series price.
Well, look, I'll tell you this much. I love that price. And considering that last year in the Western Conference Finals, Denver swept the Lakers, that is a great price to have here in the 2-7 matchup. The one thing I will say is you mentioned Anthony Davis having one of his better years. Yep. The key there is Anthony Davis had one of his healthier seasons that he's ever had in the NBA. And of course, he had the migraine thing, he had the spasms going on. But if Anthony Davis and LeBron James are both at full health this entire series, that's going to scare me a little bit, that play, if it goes to game 6. If those guys are fully healthy and their backs are against the wall at home in a game 6, that would scare me a little bit. The key here, I really think game 1 is going to be huge. Who has the advantage? The Nuggets having a full week of rest, or the Lakers being a little more fine-tuned, having a game Tuesday night, but still not having to play Friday night, having 3 days of rest. It's enough rest where it's not too much. So game 1's going to be intriguing. If the Nuggets win game 1, I think that you're, I don't want to say home free, but I think you're in really good shape if the Nuggets win game 1.
And you look at history of LeBron and teams that he's played for, not necessarily last year because they went out and took care of business right away against the Grizzlies, but sometimes kind of a feeling out process. I think he knows the urgency's there. Right now, Lakers a 7-point underdog in game number 1. Contemplating a couple of the play-in games tomorrow. Not ready to pull the trigger. Maybe tomorrow morning when I'm on with JVT doing Follow the Money. What do you got for us? A little late-night baseball?
A little baseball action. Light slate today. It was just 5 games to begin with. 3 of them were done in the morning, and we got a rain out. I like the over 7.5. Miami, Chicago. I figured because of the chance of rain, I'd have, a good number there at 7.5 against 2 pitchers that give up a ton of runs, AJ Puck, Jameson Taillon. But the rain was too much. That one's canceled. So I've got 2 pitcher props because that's where I specialize. Logan Webb over 18.5 outs at plus money. The guy is an outs recorded machine at home. No one plays better to their home park than Logan Webb at Oracle. Last year, he was money for going 7 innings plus. He's done it in 12 out of his last 16 home starts. Love Webb. He also last year against Arizona went over this mark in both home starts. Did it once on the road as well. 3 out of 4 total. He went for 21 outs, let alone just 19 that we need out of him today. I also went under 2.5 earned runs. They kind of go hand in hand here. If he's dominant, he's going to go deep into the game, probably do a good job against this Arizona lineup. And this D-backs lineup, there's a number out there, 4.5 strikeouts. It might look tempting. They don't strike out. 6.68 Ks per game, the lowest mark in baseball. That helps the outs recorded number because he's going to be economical. They're going to put the ball in play. They don't really hit for a high average, so they're going to put it in play, probably at someone. And I just think Logan Webb goes out there and shoves tonight.
All right, there you go. A little baseball play from Joe and just a series play from me. As we sit here right now, taking a look at tomorrow's games in the play-in tournament, New Orleans, that is the late game. Depending on where you look, either catching 1.5 at DraftKings, it's a pick'em here at Circa. Total sitting at 210.5 at Circa, 211.5 at DraftKings. So a little bit of a discrepancy there. Both games yesterday, by the way, the late 3-pointer important to some in the Philadelphia-Miami game, as that game did ultimately go over. It looked like a dead under for the majority of the game. And then late night with Chicago and Atlanta, that game easily sailed over the total. But late last night, 207.5, 208. Any in-game price was much lower, and the over ultimately hits in that one. So I believe the overs are just 4-12 now all time in playing games. And then the early game tomorrow night in Miami, once again, no Jimmy Butler. -1.5 are the Heat against the Chicago Bulls, a total of 205.5.
And Tim, as that number's popping up on our screen, I can't help but notice that Bulls team total. 101.5, no Jimmy, obviously, especially in the postseason, one of the best two-way players out there. And, I mentioned earlier that I've got the Bulls money line in that one. That team total, if you think the Bulls are going to win or if it's going to be a close game with Jimmy Butler sidelined, you have to imagine Chicago's going to exceed 101.5. I think that team total is a really good number to look at. There might be some movement there. I would play that early.
Yeah, right now 101.5 pretty much at DraftKings, a 102 out there on some offshore shops. So we will run through all of the NBA playoff games a little bit later on in the show. Femi Abebefe going to join us here in 5 minutes. I do want to just kind of hint on a couple of what I've played so far in the draft market. This market moves so rapidly, and you look at Brock Bowers. We were talking about last night. Is he going to be landing there at 10? I think the Brock Bowers discussion, as we talked to John Daigle last hour, Joe, is really intriguing. Sitting at 11.5, 12.5, depending on where you look. Is he targeted for the Jets? If not, does he slide a little bit? I think Brock Bowers is one of the more fascinating type of players to keep an eye on when it comes to that draft position out there.
Yeah, it's pretty much Bowers or offensive line for the Jets. And I think if you're looking at building a franchise long-term, the smart move there is to go O-line at 10 and have a guy who can be groomed and, really grow with his quarterback. But Aaron Rodgers probably has a 1-year window. And if you're dealing with a quarterback with a 1-year window, you got to give him a weapon. I'm pretty confident in this Brock Bowers going at 10 at some pretty good plus money. All
right, we'll talk to Femi Abebefe, get his thoughts on the draft and what we've seen unfold so far in free agency.
This is VSiN PrimeTime with Tim Murray and Jonathan Von Tobel on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
Don't miss out on any of the NBA playoff action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. From the play-in tournament, which wraps up tomorrow night, through the finals, DraftKings Sportsbook has you covered with same-game parlays, live betting, odds boosts, and so much more. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use the code VSiN. New customers bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Once again, the code VSIN only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. It is VSiN PrimeTime alongside Joe Serralo. I am Tim Murray. We're live here in Vegas. We're brought to you by DraftKings. Top of the hour. It's been crazy. The movement today in the number 2 overall pick market. We are going to get to a lot of different sound and just where we have come in this number 2 overall pick market, which is currently owned by the Washington Commanders. They, according to Adam Peters, are not moving off of that pick. They will be using that pick a week from today. And to help us break it down, get his thoughts on it as well, you can see him on the Lombardi line. Also hear him on the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi. It is our own married man, Femi Abebefe, who joins us right now. Welcome back, sir. Congratulations. Nice new ring on the finger. I like to see it. You got a little Beyonce in you. You put a ring on it, so you're feeling good. All right. First time Beyonce has ever been mentioned on this show, and we press on. Wow. So what do we think, Femi, is going on at number 2? Because the odds market has been cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. It got as high as minus 350 that Jaden Daniels would be the number 2 pick or would go ahead of Drake May, because that's the market here at Circa. And now it has come down to minus 160 Daniels, plus 120, plus 130, depending on what shot for Drake May to go to Washington.
No, it's good to be on with you guys. I would say the thing that's happening with this market is that everyone's making educated guesses as of right now. And the key word in that is a guess. Even though it's informed, even though it's educated, we can kind of like connect the dots and try to do what we can do to sort of find out the answer to this riddle. I think it's still speculation. The Washington Commanders have not come out and said anything. In fact, you mentioned Adam Peters, general manager. He comes from the 49ers brass. We know the 49ers historically have been very secretive about what they're doing during the draft. We all lived through the Mac Jones, Trey Lance, Justin Fields picked at 3 sort of debacle there where everybody thought it was going to be Mac Jones leading up, and all of a sudden the morning of the draft we found out that it was Trey Lance. Now, that's not to say that Adam Peters is going to do exactly what Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch did, but I mean, he learned from that organization that seemed to be pretty successful from my standpoint. So I think as of right now, and Peters, he alluded to it during his media availability earlier today, speaking with the Commanders media, that, hey, they still haven't decided. Now, I don't believe that fully. I think that he has decided. I just don't think anybody else in that organization knows, which I think would be a little bit surprising to most fans. I think that everybody would know. It's like, oh, they've come to a decision. They're kind of like high-fiving around, and they'll wait to announce it on draft day. I don't think Peters has really told anyone, which is why we're still a little uncertain at this point. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting when we saw the initial move with Daniels going out to minus 200, 250, 300, usually if it's like known, it's like the Caleb Williams price of minus 20,000, where it's one-way traffic, run away, and then it's just done. But this never seemed done to me, given the fact that it was still minus 350. I was always skeptical, and I speak of this as somebody who has yet to enter the market with draft betting so far. I'm waiting for more information to come out because, I mean, like you mentioned it, Tim, I just got married. I had a lot going on during this draft process. I haven't been able to be dialed in fully. So, like, I feel like right now coming in is like the best time to where I can at least figure out what's real and what's fake. And I think the big thing with this whole week that's leading up to it, now that we're 7 days away from the actual draft night for the first round, I think we're going to start to hear some fake stuff. And then maybe towards the end, once we get to Wednesday of next week, we'll start to hear the real. So as of right now, I think it could be Drake May. It could be Jaden Daniels. Just because it bounced back doesn't mean that it can't be Daniels. But I think right now everyone's just making educated guesses. And folks all along have thought that Daniels might be a really good fit with Cliff Kingsbury and that offense for the Commanders. And that's why he's the favored person right now at minus 165 at DraftKings. But I think these are still guesses at the end of the day.
Yeah, Femi, great to have you on. By the way, congratulations again on your tremendous news. Great stuff right there with what's going on at number 2 and the fact that, let's face it, Adam Peters knows what he's going to do. I don't think he'd be an NFL GM if a week out from the draft he didn't know what he was going to do. Yeah. But whether or not the rest of the organization knows, it's definitely that could be attributing to why we're seeing so much late movement here. I want to look at that number 3 pick because say Jaden Daniels is the pick. at 2? Or even if it's Drake May, is it a guarantee that the one that doesn't get taken second will go to New England third? It would be the very Belichickian thing to do to take a guy like J.J. McCarthy or an outsider there and have no one expect it. But Belichick's out from New England. How do you feel about that third pick? Is it a lock? It's either going to be Daniels or May, whoever's there, or could it be J.J. or someone else?
I don't think it's a lock. I don't. And I think one of the reasons why we can't say it's a lock is because everyone's still trying to figure out what the Commanders are going to do. In fact, I mean, to go along with it, I mean, the Minnesota Vikings, who are a team that a lot of people would identify as one that could move up in the draft since they're equipped with those 2 first-round picks, 11 and 23, they're doing their homework on Jaden Daniels as of yesterday, inviting him out to a meal to come visit. So, like, nobody's thinking that anything is a lock. And depending on who's there, maybe it is Jaden Daniels if they went ahead and took Drake May at number 2 for the Commanders. But it could be J.J. McCarthy. We've heard the Vikings have some interest in J.J. McCarthy. We've other teams. It doesn't have to be Minnesota. It could be Denver. It could be the Raiders. It could be any of these teams that move up there to number 3. And one thing that has been discussed throughout this draft process is that New England is not afraid to trade down. Now, I think that they'll ultimately end up taking somebody there at number 3 overall. But if they get one of those Godfather type offers to move down and get some more draft picks, I don't think that they will kind of scoff at that. I think they would give that serious consideration. And then you'd have to identify which team moves up to 3 and who do they like. So I think the whole thing right now is what it kind of boils down to is what is Washington going to do? Who's going to be on the board at 3? And then what happens after that in terms of what New England likes or what maybe some of these other teams just sitting outside the top 10 like. But I don't think you can say that it's going to be Daniels, May, or May, Daniels at 2-3. I think there's so much uncertainty, and it goes right back to what the Washington Commanders are going to do. And then that's ultimately when we might see some of these trades that have been projected later on come into the top 10.
Femi Abebefe joining us here on our Progressive Guest Line. Make sure you get the GM Shuffle wherever you get your podcasts. He and Michael Lombardi. Femi, myself, and Michael Lombardi will be doing our draft special a week from today. So it'll be 2 hours of VSiN PrimeTime and then a special with Femi, Michael, and myself here. So looking forward to that a week from today. So, you know, you had the Tony Pauline report today saying that there was desperation in Denver. They could trade up to as high as number 3 and get J.J. McCarthy. I want to key in on what the New York Giants might do, Femi. With the Daniel Jones situation, Brian Daboll 2 years ago applauded as a genius, and then this past year they struggle a little bit, and now there's questions in the Big Apple. Peter Schrager in his mock draft, he had the Giants moving up to number 4 and drafting J.J. McCarthy, and he has done a bit of a media tour here lately, and he said he got a lot of reaction from folks around the league about that move, thinking it could possibly happen. What do you expect and what do you think the Giants should do sitting there at 6 with the uncertainty at their quarterback position?
Gosh, what they should do is I think they need to go ahead and draft a quarterback of the future because I think right now they're having a little bit of buyer's remorse for Daniel Jones and the contract that they gave him last offseason. What they will do, I think, is the ultimate question here because the New York Giants, ever since it's been this new Joe Schoen, Brian Daboll regime, they have been throwing out all sorts of smoke screens and zigging when people think they're going to zag. I mean, you can look back to a lot of the guys that they've liked. Was it 2 years ago, I believe it was, might have been last year, which they were linked to Charles Cross, the offensive tackle at Mississippi State. Everyone said Charles Cross Giants, Charles Cross, and little did they know they had their eyes set on Evan Neal the whole time. And nobody thought the Giants were going to go for Thibodeau and all that stuff. And then, they draft Kayvon Thibodeau in that top 5 there. So it's like the Giants have been kind of hard to read versus the previous Giants regime with Dave Gettleman. They kind of tell you who they're going to pick, and they pick that person. Made it much easier for us as draft bettors. But now this team, you kind of have to read between the lines of what New York is doing. Now, I do think they have serious interest at quarterback because they wouldn't have brought Russell Wilson in to come in on a visit. They wouldn't have done these other things to kind of like bring in all these other guys if they weren't actually entertaining it. I just don't know if they're going to entertain it in round 1. I could see them maybe being one of those types of teams that goes ahead and goes for a Michael Penix if he falls out of the first round, if they take him early in the second round. So I think that you could see the New York Giants. I don't know if they'll want to admit that Evan Neal hasn't worked out at tackle, but I could see maybe them going a Marvin Harrison Jr. or one of these wide receivers to help out Daniel Jones to try to make it work and what's probably going to be his last year as a quarterback for the New York Giants. So my guess is that they go kind of best player available, and likely at 5, the best player available, good chance it could be Marvin Harrison Jr. if you get some movement at 4 with the Arizona Cardinals.
Femi, love everything you just said, man, especially as a Giants fan. I'd much rather grab Penix in the second round with a first-round wideout than have this team take J.J. McCarthy, who to me is just Zach Wilson with a slightly better GPA. I'm curious, the receiver market, though, real quick, we got about 20 seconds. Any legitimacy to this Brandon Ayuk rumor that the Niners might move him, try to get some draft capital in the next week?
I could see it just because these teams are always looking to churn, but my guess is I think Ayuk is still on the 49ers after draft week. But if anything does happen, though, it's between now and next Thursday would be my guess.
That's Femi Abebefe. Who will go number 2? Is Jaden Daniels a lock?